ain't no problem. Oh, you didn't go to the front now? That's all I mean. Yeah, we still have the same. We had plans to do it.
Okay, got it. Got it.
Let's read verses 1 and 2. In the third year of reign of Jehoiakim, king of Judah, Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, came to Jerusalem and besieged it. The Lord delivered Jehoiakim, king of Judah, into his hands, along with some of the articles of the temple of God. These carried off to of his God in Babylon, but and put in the treasure of the house of God. So when Jehoiakim was reigning, his father was Joash. And he was a righteous man. If you look at the king and study the king, every king that northern kingdom had, and even by outside. But the southern kingdom has some good kings and has some bad kings. Jehoiakim's father was a good king. He did right. But Jehoiakim did evil.
What, the cat,
So
the train? Yeah, we was in the lot.
Babylon,
Oh,
King Nebuchadnezzar.
None of us did. Real had.
Judah took captivity, and they were delivered into his hand. And to add insult to injury, he went into that temple. He got some of the fixtures of that temple, and he carried it into his temple in Babylon, and brought it into the house of his God. It's kind of bad. Like, can you imagine if, our enemy Russia came, which we know way things are going, if they happen. They came to America, and they just took this place over. We became subservient to Russia. And the way this guy is in the White House is now, he might sell the country. But then we take some of our prized possessions, say that Statue of Liberty, or some of these other things, but something even more than that, all of our churches, we're going to take all of our churches, all of your assets, and we're going to take all of that, all of the money, and you're going to sell your buildings. We're going to use it, our God, Russia. That's the situation the children of Israel are in. They love that temple. Solomon built that temple, a very grand temple. But he went into the temple. He got some of the fixtures of the temple, carried it to Babylon, and put it in the treasure of his God. Small God, which really would not be a God. Any comments or questions? This is because the children of Israel turned their backs on God. We got to be careful. Just being trivial about God. We got to take God serious. So I should have no other gods before me. God is not a one thing. Yes, sir. Yes. These were the Jews. They were Jewish people. Huh? God's chosen people. They were God's chosen people. But now we're God's chosen people now. We're Christians.
Yes.
But those that he loved, he has to chastise. They turned on God. God didn't turn on them. They started doing things that God told them not to do. They started worshiping other gods themselves. And God warned them. They had prophets. We could go into it I just read one prophecy where God warned Hezekiah that they would have some of their kids be eunuchs because he didn't listen to God. Prophets warned
over and over again, just like preachers are preaching today, just like teachers are teaching today about, how God wants us to conduct ourselves. God is merciful. God is slow to anger, but God's patience can run out. Sometimes he has to make us come back to him in a harsh way. You have children, and if you really love your children, you're going to raise them right. And then if they decide they want to defy you, you're going to have to try to make them understand that where you're headed is in the wrong direction. And then once they get out of your head, they keep on going in the wrong direction. They may feel the pain that you try to keep them from feeling. God warned the people over and over again. But they chose not to hear prophets. Now they're having to suffer consequences. Other comments, questions? All right, so they're in Babylon now. Nebuchadnezzar is the king. He is a wicked king. The third verse, I'm going to read a few of these verses. We're in Daniel, the first chapter. Then the king ordered Ashpenaz, the chief of his court officers, to bring into the king's service some of the Israelites from the royal family and the nobility, young men without physical defect, handsome, showing aptitude for every kind of learning, well informed, quick to understand, qualified to serve in the king's palace. He was to teach them the language and the literature of the Babylonians. The king assigned them a daily amount of food and wine from the king's table. They were to be trained for 3 years, and after that they would enter the king's service. So they started carrying these people to Babylon. And they got some young boys, very young. Some of the people that we studied said that Daniel was probably about 13 or 14 years old when he went to Babylon. So they were young kids. Once you get to a certain age, you kind of get fixed, but some young kids, you can mold them to think a different way. So that was the power from Nebuchadnezzar. Get some very young boys. Don't just get any kind. I want the best that you can find. He had this chief officer to find young men without any physical defects. I don't want any cripples. I want some handsome young men. I want some smart young men that can learn and well informed, quick to understand, and qualify them to serve in the king's palace. He wanted to deprogram these kids and program them to think like Babylonians. He wanted to teach them the language, teach them the literature of the Babylonians. And I want them to eat from my table. I want them to eat food. I want them to have the wine that comes directly from the king's table. So in other words, I want to feed them like a Babylonian. I want them to learn like a Babylonian. I want them to forget about their country. Really what he wanted to do is to brainwash them, make them think like Babylonians. And then they'll be ready to serve me in my temple. And so this is where Daniel, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego found themselves. Can you imagine being 12 or 13 years old, carried off into a far country, enemy nation, and you're under this king? This king was a nice guy. We know the story. We're going to get into some things that he did. He put folks in lines and he put folks in fiery furnaces. So I'm sure that he was not a man to play with. And he went trained, brainwashed, think like a Babylonian. Any comments about that?
I just was just looking at the parallel today. You know, we got a person that's self-appointed king that's sitting high in the administration, and you look at all the different things that are going on. I mean, if you just open your eyes, you know, removing DEI from everything. So it's almost like you see the whole parallel over where they're trying to deprogram. If we're not careful, our youth, they will get deprogrammed because there won't be no teaching of how they, you know, how the ancestors went through all these different things, and how that they are a proud race, that your race did things, you know, were there at all these different things in the armies, and you know, and different things. So they'll have you brainwashed to think that we are nobody, and have them thinking like this person thinks. So you see that right today.
And sadly, not just our young folks, but many of us think we're nobody. Now, that's why I'm glad that we are at least Black history every month in the church. But we gotta spread the word ourselves. First of all, we gotta learn our history ourselves. Then we gotta teach it. And then even your time on this earth, you learn some things about God, some things about who we are. Tell your story. Tell about how God brought you from where we came from. Not everybody in here, except for that baby back there, that lived at a time when today was not possible. How we live today wasn't possible. Not all of us have witnessed some of the opportunities that we have now were impossible when you were kids. Our parents didn't have the opportunities that we have. Most of them didn't. And we had a few. But overall, my generation was the first one that masses of us graduated from high school. So God has brought us from a long way. But kids will look at where we are right now, and they'll think that, you know, we got here, we always been here. No, we got to tell people where we came from. And then our parents, I mean, I don't know, my parents had told me stories about how it was in their day. So we ought to tell that story too. That's how the Israelites were told to do that. They said, take up stones and tell your kids and your grandkids how God brought you to the promised land. Let them know where you came from, and let them know how God delivered you. We got to tell our stories to our kids ourselves, because they are trying to deprogram us, and they are threatening people that if you don't do it our way, we're going to destroy you. So we have definitely witnessed some of the same kind of attitudes that Nebuchadnezzar had. We have a wicked king in place now too, but we also have a God that can rule over him when we come back to him. And the reason why they got in trouble, and I think the reason why we got in trouble too, is because we stopped taking God serious. We started putting other things in God's place, like our minds and our money and our position. Not anything wrong with that, as long as you have God first in your life. Other comments? All right, so he told them to teach these boys, train them, feed them. And in 3 years after you get through training them, after you program them so much, after you with them every day and you're pouring this in their head, then they'll be ready to serve me in my palace. Okay, among those who were chosen, some from Judah, Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, Azariah, the chief officer gave them new names. To Daniel, the name Belteshazzar. To Hananiah, Shadrach. To Mishael, Meshach. To Azariah, Abednego. Let's look at these names. They had their names that their parents gave them. And back then, names meant something. The name Daniel means God is my judge. God is my judge. They wanted his name to be changed to Belteshazzar. That means whom Baal favors, the keeper of the prince of Baal. So you see what they're doing? They're trying to pull them away from the real God and make them, every time they say that name, you're talking about Baal. Every time you said Daniel, you were talking about God is my judge. Every time you said Belteshazzar, you're talking about Baal, whom Baal favors, the keeper of the treasure of the prince of Baal. Deprogramming them. Hananiah. Every time you heard that word Hananiah, it was saying God is gracious. So the name was programming them to believe in God. But he said, change his name to Shadrach, which means illumined by Shach, the sun God. So every time you call his name, you're talking about the sun God. It's this false God. Every time you call his name, you're talking about you putting light on Shach, who is the sun God. So you stop thinking about the God that was in Israel. Stop thinking about the real God and start thinking about this false God. Mishael, whose name meant who is like God. God is great. Every time you said Mishael, you were saying who is like God. God is great. But we're going to change your name to Meshach. And that means every time you hear your name is who is like Shach, the love goddess. Every time you hear Meshach, you're talking about this false god, Shach, who's the love goddess. And Azariah is God is my helper. Every time you heard Azariah, you heard God is my helper. I'm going to change your name to Abednego, the servant of Nego, who is a fire god. So every time you said Abednego, you're talking about this false god who they considered to be the fire god. You see what they were doing? They were trying to make them stop thinking about it. You put your whole loyalty, you put your whole being into Babylon. You be a Babylonian. Change your mind. Change your thoughts. Your parents taught you one way. But the good part about this story is somewhere down the line, these boys were taught. We need to get our kids in Sunday school. We need to get our kids in Bible class. We need to teach our kids at home. I don't understand why, I was called to come to church, Bible class, Sunday school. Why do I want my kids to have less than I had? It took all of that for me to be what I am today. We got to program our kids' mind the right way. The devil has a program for them. Just like these Babylonians. That wasn't anything but the devil trying to pull God out of their hearts. When we all got to a certain age, most of us anyway, I can't say everybody, I did, got to looking at the world, I got to want to do some of the things that the world had to offer, but when I wanted to do right, I knew what right was. These boys, you're going to see where they were taught very well about the God of Israel. They didn't let that leave their hearts and their minds. So they were trying to deprogram, and I can imagine many of the other kids that they brought over there in their chose quickly accepted, and they fit in with the rest of the Babylonians. But Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, and Daniel, they changed their names. They tried to deprogram them, but we're going to see what it didn't work. We don't always have to meet. It's hard sometimes to be an oddball. But sometimes you got to take a stand for what is right. I don't care who else is going wrong. You got to make up in your mind, I'm going to do what is right. And so these boys had a lot of pressure put on them. They wasn't men. They were boys. Comments, questions?
I was just going to say, that story is like in Roots when they tried to change Kunta Kinte's name because he said, my name is not Toby. You know, he knew in his heart that he come from royalty. He knew who he was and what he was. But the master knew he had to break him, or the other slaves would start to think they was royalty, you know. And the thing our children will miss is they won't know when it starts to change on them that, you know, you're nothing. You know, you got your name from a slave master. And y'all wanted to be slaves. That's why they taking the books out of the schools, because they want slavery taught as the way they want to say it. And when our children don't learn this stuff right here, they won't even see it coming. You know, how it's slowly back to the way it was. You are nothing. You are Toby.
Yep. That's what's happening now. They want it to be where they can discriminate again. No more DEI. And I guarantee you, every person that had those jobs were 5 times smarter than the average person that was white. Because if they got the job, they had to be better. I'm a witness to that because, you know, and I won't brag on myself, but I had to be better to even be considered. I was told that a man with a high school diploma, and I had a college degree, said our qualification was so close they couldn't put a credit card between it. The mayor said that of the city of Huntsville. Yeah. So DEI doesn't mean that they just get unqualified folks. They get people. And really, they're shooting themselves in the foot because some of these contractors don't want them. Because they're working right beside them, and they're going to have that intelligence. But they want to use the intelligence and not give you the position. That's what happened all the way through slavery and everywhere else. We never was dumb. And we ought to quit telling our kids that they're dumb. Yes. You ain't no good. You're programming their minds in. You ought to let them know what, I see greatness in you. Y'all hear me tell the kids this around here, because somebody needs to tell them that there's possibilities in you, because the world is going to tell them that you're nothing. But we need to tell them that you're a child of God and you have the ability to learn just like anybody else. So we got to program our children and not let the world do it. If they don't hear from us, the world is not going to tell them. They can learn. They got good minds. I never have felt inferior to anybody. I wasn't taught to feel that way. But so many were. Other comments? So they wanted to deprogram them, gave them different names. Verse 8, Daniel resolved not to defile himself with the royal food and wine, but he asked the chief officer for permission not to defile himself this way. You see him start to take a stand now? They knew the law. They knew the food that was offered to idols was not supposed to be. They knew that there was some food that were considered unclean. And Daniel God, if you want to do what's right, God will help you do what's right. Daniel asked this officer that was over him, don't make me defile myself. I don't want food from the royal table. Can you imagine some of those other boys over there say, you gonna let me eat what the king's table? That's the best food I can eat like that. They probably knew that back home, we weren't supposed to eat that kind of stuff. But Daniel said, don't make me do it. Daniel wasn't saying he wasn't going to do it, but he asked them not to make me eat the royal food and the wine from the chief officers. He asked permission not to defile himself. So he was holding on to his faith in God. He knew what God had instructed the prophets and all the priests to tell the people to eat and not to eat. So he wanted to continue to be faithful to God. Comments about that? Okay, verse 9. Now God had caused the officer to show favor and compassion to Daniel. You want to do what's right? God will make a way. God just let that man see something in this little boy right here. There's something different about it. And he just liked Daniel. Daniel carried himself a certain way. God gave him favor with this officer that was over these boys. And then, but the officer told Daniel, I'm afraid of my lord the king, who has assigned your food and drink. Why should he see you looking worse than the other young boys your age? The king would then have my head because of you. I like you, Daniel, but if I do what you ask me to do, you're not going to look as healthy as the other kids. And I'm the one that's going to have to pay the price. The king gonna cut my head off if you're looking bad. He gave me this responsibility to make y'all fit to be in his palace. You're asking me something that's a hard ask. So that's the situation that Daniel found himself in. Any comments before we go forward? All right, 11. Daniel then said to the guard whom the chief officer had appointed over Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, please test your servants for 10 days. Give us nothing but vegetables to eat and water to drink. Verse 13, then compare our appearance with that of the young men who eat the royal food, and treat your servants in accordance with what you see. So he agreed to this and tested them for 10 days. He said, just let the 4 of us eat just vegetables and drink just water. And if we look at worse than the other kids, then you do what you got to do. So this guy who was over them gave them permission. He only let them eat vegetables and drink water for 10 days. After 10 days, check it out and see how we look. Any comments? Questions?
Yes, sir. Pastor, you know, when we look at that, what jumped out to me with that was the number 10. You know, because they say that the number 10 is a complete number for humans or whatever. You know, we got 10 fingers, 10 toes, things like that. Because, you know, normally when we set up and think about something, we'd say, well, give me a week, which is 7 days. Give me 2 weeks, 14 days. But these men, these young boys, who decided to trust in God, who decided that they were going to not pollute themselves, they used the number 10. And then when we think about 10, how many plagues were there that God had done to free the children of Israel? There were 10 of them. You know, so it just kind of lets us know that they still are holding on to their Jewish faith by even selecting that number 10. Because you know, give me a week, give me 2 weeks, but they chose 10.
Then let's remember, I don't want us to forget, about 13, 14. You know, that's a lot of courage. You know, that's a lot of faith that have been placed in these boys. A lot of times we want boys to be tough, hard, rugged, but they were taught how important the real God was. And he had enough nerve to ask us just to give us vegetables and water. Like I said, I imagine some of the rest of those guys said, hey, this is hard because I got a feast here. I'm going to get the best food. I'm going to get wine from the king's table. Yeah, I know what mom and daddy said, but I'm going to perform and I'm going to be living high on the hog. But these four boys said, we don't want to defile us. We were taught not to eat certain food. We were taught not to eat food off the idols. So it took a lot of courage. And that has to be placed in kids. You got to give them confidence in themselves to say, I don't have to be like everybody else. I don't know about your friends, but they, you know, we could make a case that well, they do it over there. He said, well, you know, you my child, you're not going to do it. You know, you got to hold the standard. You got to pass the values that we receive down to the next generation. It's okay for them to get a better education. It's okay for them to get on the track team or be on the football team, but they need to have some character. They need to have some do's and don'ts in them. They need to know what is right. That's what these boys went to Babylon with. They didn't forget about it because they were in a foreign country. They held on to what they were taught. But you got to be taught. And then we got to know how to teach it. You got to pass it on. I thought my parents were old and broken. They just didn't know what was happening. And they just didn't know what was going on. Yeah, they knew. They knew more than I knew. I thought they did. They loved me enough to tell me what is right and the man that I do. And when I got to a certain age, like I said, I can't talk about you, but I did do some things I shouldn't have done. But when I wanted to do what's right, I knew what right was. Other comments? Like Brady used to say, test day is coming, and they have the test now. A lot of them didn't pass that test. Okay, verse 15. At the end of the 10 days, they looked healthier and better nourished than any of the young men who ate the royal food. For God took away their choice food and wine. They were to drink and gave them vegetables instead. So we see that some of the others who came over from Babylon, they took the king's meat and they drank the king's wine. But Daniel, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego looked better than they did. God's not going to leave you out there hanging if you're trying to do it good. You might have to suffer some, but God is going to be with you. God let them look better than the others. Comments? All right, verse 17. To these four young men, God gave knowledge and understanding of all kinds of literature and learning. And Daniel could understand visions and dreams of all kinds. So God let them have the ability to learn better than the rest of them. God needs some people that he can use. If you're willing to be used by God, he'll make a way for you. He'll give you opportunities and
brother sold them off to a tribe of Israelites, and they went to a foreign country, and he went into Potiphar's house, and he got in trouble in Potiphar's house, went to prison, and eventually he told those baker and the butler their dream. He said, remember me when you get restored. They forgot about it. But then the king had a dream. And nobody could understand it. But God let Daniel be able to understand the dream. He got elevated to second in command in Egypt. So God is able to raise you up over your enemy. So you don't even have to fight your own battle. Just ask God to lead and guide you. If he tell you to fight, fight. But if he tell you to be still, let God help you. Comments, questions?
Wait a minute.
I just wondered whether people can interpret dreams, because I had an aunt that could interpret dreams. I just wondered what that.
God is not trying to hide anything from us.
Now, every dream sometimes you ain't wrong. But if it's a vision or a dream, it's different. I have a dream now. I don't know if anybody else does. I had a niece that she was having visions and dreams, and she said she didn't like it. She didn't want to have it. I said, God is just giving you some information. Just giving you some warning. He just letting you know something. But they do mean something. God does communicate with us. And sometimes I think he has to lay us down in the bed and get our mind off everything else when we talk to him. God is always talking to us. Many times we're not listening. But when you relax in the bed and go to sleep, sometimes God can talk to you. And if you ask him, he'll let you know what he's saying. Yes, I do believe you understand. It's like people speaking in tongues. He said, you need to have an interpreter. God is not an author of confusion. If he wants you to know something, he can make you allow you to know it. Now, I'll share one thing that I know I saw when I came here. I had a vision about this church. God showed me exactly what was going to happen. He even showed me that the Dixon group was going to leave. That's why he got here. So God does give the dream of vision. I can tell you more about that, but he does. He will let you know sometimes what's going to happen in the future. I've had times when he showed me trouble was going to come. And when the trouble came, because God had revealed it to me, it didn't shake me like it could have. He'd already warned me ahead of time. But yes, if you seek God, you'll find him. He's a rewarder of those who are willing to seek him. And it is good for us to seek God and ask him to guide our footsteps. And he'll let you know his plan for your life. And that's something that we need to teach kids young. They need to understand that. We don't have to go out here making the same mistakes we made if they'll learn how to seek God. I had some people I know some people that went to school 4 years. When they got out of school, they decided, I don't want to work in what I spent my 4 years with. That's not what I'm designed to do. My brother, he was a good drawer, and he took a class in civil engineering. He passed, graduated, never worked. We worked there a little while in, and then he got to be a promoter. Man, and then he does, he want to be active. He never intended for us to walk this journey by ourselves anyway. That's when Adam and Eve messed up. They started trying to be as wise as God. God can see better than we can see. He knows what He made you. We make many mistakes because we don't consult God. In all your ways, acknowledge Him, get rid of the past. Other comments, questions? But Daniel could see visions and dreams. So at the end of that time, the king, at the end of the time set by the king to bring them into his service, the chief officer presented them to Nebuchadnezzar. The king talked with them. He found none equal to Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. So they entered the king's service. In every matter of wisdom and understanding about which the king questioned them, he found them to be 10 times better than all magicians and enchanters of his whole kingdom. Daniel remained there until the first year of King Cyrus. So they had enough learning. They had enough conviction. Said we don't want to lose who we are. We want to continue to carry on what we were taught. We're not going to apply. And that took a lot of courage. That could have been strong. This man was afraid that he was going to lose his head. And he did what Daniel asked him. But Daniel was brave enough that he said, just give me a test. And see how we're going to turn out. And this man loved Daniel enough where he trusted him. Let him test y'all for 10 days. And then after you test them, they look better than those who are eating the king's meat. And the king's drinking his wine. And then he let them continue to stay in that regimen. They were able to understand God. They were able to learn God. God gave them favor. And after that 3 years was up, after that training period was up, the king called them in. And the king examined these boys. And he had examined the other. And they come through eating the meat and the wine. They were 10 times smarter, 10 times better than those others. And after 70 years of King Cyrus, Daniel was able to remain where he was in the standard of the king. He had favor with the king because he was wise. He became a high official. He stood for the king. He was in his service. Others. We don't have to be like everybody else. Don't let it, the Bible even says it's not lie or practice. We are all unique may be spanning all the way past where we are right now. So you don't see God's plan. He showed that what's going to happen past 2025. You have a sick one bill, big we actually let this place do things. Young people live in this society that they live in. So we actually let them know where they are, let them know about their depression and suicide. So enable us to walk like before, raise them up above that situation. We know that you can take people who are out of the society